Welcome today to this little forum for the 2014, the big one. First of all, before we do anything else, I think I ought to introduce you to the person who's taken over the reins from where Nick left off when he departed this stage. I think there were a lot of us who were hoping that somebody would take the reins, and this man has had the bottle to do it. This event is going to be brilliant. It's his concept, it's his ideas. Ladies and gentlemen, Mark Soloway.
Thank you for that, Mike. I'm not really good at speaking in public, but I just want to say a few things. I just want to thank you all for attending today anyway. It's been not a bad turnout. And I just want to introduce you to our red shirts for the event. Is Mike Summerfield, Ron Jackson, Steve Weston, and we've got some others there with Ken Rees, and Ryland and Bo. The initial idea behind this event is I was lucky enough to do 3 of Nick's events, 2 London Sydney's and 1 Midnight Sun to Red Sea. And as Mike said, once Nick went, there was nobody left to do these, and I was having a few emails and phone calls from customers over the world saying that they'd like to do something like this again. For me personally, doing the first one in 2000 actually changed my life, and it was a life-changing event. And then I just thought one day then, well, let's try and pull something off again, and hopefully in 2014 we can run an event, you know, somewhere as good as Nick did. So with that, that's the reason why we're here. So I'll pass you back to Mike now, and then you can answer any questions you've got directed at the event. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. I think the first thing to say is this one came up in Australia. It was actually quite interesting. Somebody said, "Who the hell are you lot? We don't know you." And I think for anybody who's been involved with long distance rallying, I think it's safe to say that Nick's red shirts became a little bit legendary, and pretty much the whole of the old TWE red shirt team is on board, with the addition of some new faces, all of whom have enhanced the event even before it started. We've got Steve here who's looking after all the logistics and is doing a super fine job. He's even teaching me and Ron tricks we didn't know about. We've got Keith Ashley who's come on board as clerk of the course, bringing a vast amount of experience from many events that he's clerked in this country. And we've got our dynamic duo who are probably the most important crew on the event, Ryland and Bose, who crew the 3-day car, without whom we are quite sure you would end up getting lost somewhere. So the team is basically the same that those of you who've done the events before know, with some very good additions. Okay, I think probably the best place to start is the route. And you'll know that in the initial thoughts that we had, we were going to do 2 aviation lifts, one out of Australia to somewhere else, and then one into Europe. Our first thought was to go into Thailand and Burma. However, a little bit of closer investigation revealed 2 things. The first one was that there is absolutely no motorsport infrastructure in Burma at all, and it was going to prove very difficult to get roads closed and roads secured. Thailand, very keen to have us there, but basically all they could offer us was plantation type stages, which are challenging in a way, but basically straight 90 right, straight 90 left, straight 90 right ditch, and really not what we were looking for. The other thought then was to fly into the Middle East, and I'm fortunate in that I do a bit in the Middle East, so I've got a bit of a good knowledge of the area. The idea would have been to fly into somewhere like Dubai, go and do some stages, possibly in the desert, if we could have found some smooth enough for us, because they're generally pretty rough stages out there, but probably to centre on Oman. The difficulty then was getting out and away, and the original idea was to think about driving across Saudi Arabia and up into Europe that way. Well, Syria put the kibosh totally on that one, and then we had the famous Arab Spring. Now, those of you who know the Middle East will know that there have been little altercations in Bahrain. There's been a few in Oman which didn't really make the headlines here very much, but they still happened. Saudi is a bit of a powder keg at the moment. So we made a decision, really based on safety, I guess, that it was probably better to make a decision now than have to make a decision maybe 3 or 4 weeks before the event that we were going to have to change the route completely. So the route now is from Sydney right the way across Australia, the bottom side of Australia, through Melbourne, through Adelaide, across the Nullarbor, and ending up in Perth. We've then got an aviation lift from Perth into Antalya in Turkey, where our old mate in Turkey is going to organise, I'm quite sure, some incredible stuff for us. From there, we're up into Bulgaria, Serbia, Bosnia-Herzegovina, Croatia, and into Italy. From Italy, we go into France, and in France, fingers crossed, we've got some of the stages that everybody wants to do, down just in that little hill above Monte Carlo. And if that works, that is going to be probably one of the keynote parts of the event. We're then going to bring the event across the water on a ferry, probably an overnight one, make use of it as a hotel for you, and bring the event into the UK. We're quite determined that we're going to finish the event off stage-wise in Wales. And we're going to endeavour to maintain the Sydney-London thing with a big ceremonial finish somewhere in the London area. So that's the route, that's the reasoning behind why we've abandoned what was initially a very, very early, very loose plan. Hopefully in April and May next year, myself and Steve, possibly one of the others, will go off and we'll do the final route recce, after which obviously we'll be able to give you chapter and verse on where it's going. One of the benefits of Mark coming on board is that he's been much more relaxed about the route and the route concept than Nick would ever let me be. So the plan is as follows. I've set all of my regional guys the task of providing me with 100k of stages a day. In Australia, that could be one stage. There's one stage I'm after, which we ran in 1995, which is 168 kilometres long. And it's the only stage I've ever been on in my life where I stood at the finish and every single competitor, all 85 of them, was in at the start 20 minutes before anybody came out at the end. It's a little bit different. Again, concentrating on Oz, a lot of the stages over there will be a lot longer than we can get in Europe. Europe is traditionally getting more difficult because of environmental concerns. So the length of stages in Europe is going to be shorter. So the plan for Europe, where we can do it, and so far the guys have said they don't see any problems with it, is to do 3 stages, have a coffee break, service halt, whatever you like to call it, and then go and do them again. So those of you who've got co-drivers that can write notes quick should be considerably faster on the second run through. Those of you who've got drivers that are dyslexic will fall off on the second run through. That's the route. The basic concept of the event hasn't changed at all. The whole idea of this is that it's an adventure, it's a challenge, but mostly it is a proper special stage event. All of the stages will be run to pretty much full FIA standards from a safety point of view. We will have all of the usual things that you're used to seeing on events in UK. We'll have rescue units, fire, cover, communications, all of those particular things. Now, it goes without saying this is a long event. At the moment, the way the route's configured, having taken into account a couple of days off, one in the middle of Australia, one in the middle of the European leg, and the aviation lifts, we're looking at 25 days of rallying. So if my plan comes off, and I've no doubt it will, we're looking at 2,500 kilometres of stages. It will be, without any question, the longest special stage event in terms of competition that's ever been run anywhere. So, it's a good one. Moving on then to a couple of other things. The question of service has reared its head in Australia, and after a little bit of thought, we've all come to the conclusion that perhaps with the fact that it is such a long event and the fact that we've got so many stage Ks in it, that perhaps we should relax the service rules a little bit. Not too much, but a little bit. We're still working on the final details, but effectively what we're looking at the moment is permitting service, but with a restricted size of vehicle and a restricted fit out for that vehicle, if it's possible to explain it that way. I.e., we're looking at Land Cruiser size vehicle, not fully racked out like a works vehicle, but certainly big enough that you can put a gearbox, an axle, whatever in it. We'll come up with a solution to this, hopefully within the next couple of weeks or so. We're planning that there will be several service options. The one which is in the regs at the moment will stay, which is where you can run a second car with your mechanics in it as an entry. But we'll also put in probably a couple of other choices. We'll put in a very basic one where you can purchase a service pack from us and then totally do your own thing. In other words, make you guys sleep in tents, in sleeping bags, whatever, and feed them out of pot noodles. Or we'll do another one which contains a bit more of a hospitality element as well. That one we'll follow up for you as soon as we can. The second thing which quite surprised us was that we've had a hell of a lot of inquiries about whether we were going to run a regularity challenge on the event like we always used to do on Nick's event. Again, we've had our thinking caps on. We've come up with several different solutions to that. We haven't made a final decision yet, but that's something that we'll also be looking at over the next few weeks. So we might have a regularity challenge running with the event as well. One of the things we saw in Australia, which absolutely stunned me, was the Rally Safe tracking system. I have to say, having seen tracking all over the place, I have never seen anything like it. It's a piece of kit which is about 1.5 times the size of a Terra Trip and a little bit thinner. But what you can do with it is unbelievable. Just to give you one idea of one of the functions in this piece of kit, you can set a distance in it, and if you're on a long stage and you catch up to a car, if you set the distance at 300 meters, when you get to 299 meters, your kit tells the car in front of you you're there. It then gives you and him a countdown as to exactly where you are. And that's apart from its basic tracking principle. It also gives us the opportunity to send you text messages. And it gives you an opportunity that if you've got a problem, there are buttons on it you can press to request assistance. something we're looking at. However, it ain't cheap. Now, the consensus in Australia was that this was something that was outside the regulations. It was something we hadn't said we were going to do. But we were so impressed with the basis of the system, which I think is now mandatory on Australian Rally Commission events. It's so good. We said to the guys in Oz, if we were to use it, we would have to make a little bit of a surcharge for using it. But we believe it would enhance the safety of the whole event. Now, we obviously at this time can't give you chapter and verse on exactly how much that surcharge would be, but we reckon it would probably be somewhere in the region of about $500, which, given the capabilities of the system, which allow us to see where you are all the time, and which gives you all of the other little facilities that are involved with it, we think is a pretty good bargain. So, I mean, basically, if we said to you guys, we're going to use Rally Safe, but it's going to cost you an extra $500, we obviously tell you about it beforehand. It's not something you're going to find out when you sign on. Would you guys be happy with something like that? Yeah? No nods, no no's? Phil? Yeah? Dan? Anybody else? Yeah? That's a good one. Okay. Right. The next one that we ought to really move on to is tyres. Now, you'll notice in the regulations there is a specific regulation which says that we will introduce a control tyre for the event. Those will be the tyres. Good old British Dunlop brand. They've been designed specifically with endurance in mind. There will be plenty to go around. The plan at the moment is that we will initiate an order form for tyres somewhere around March, April next year. They will be at a competitive price. They won't be silly money. You'll be able to order the tyres. We will come up with a distribution network, probably based upon 3 or 4 days. So probably in the case of Australia, it'll be something like, obviously initially in Sydney, Melbourne, Adelaide, and somewhere in the middle of the Nullarbor Plain. And again, the same thing in Europe. So the tyre deal, for want of a better term, will be in place very, very shortly, together with the pricing for it. There are, I know, those of you who are going to say, but I don't use Dunlop. We thought about this long and hard, and we've put it in the regulations, guys, and we're going to stick with it. So there will be a control tyre for the event, and only tyres supplied through the event will be available for use. So that's the absolute basis of the event. I think the only other things that I've got to say really revolve around how the event actually happens. And those of you who've done our events before all know the camaraderie that develops during these events, particularly on the servicing side. You'll see a film during the lunch break which a certain famous cinematographer went and asked a certain famous car builder for his help in looking after his ZX. ZX?
ZR.
ZR. Thank you, David. And that was happening all over the place on all the events. Everybody helps everybody else. The atmosphere on the event is fantastic. And more importantly for the safety of you guys, that applies as much on the stages as it does anywhere else. And nobody passes anybody that's in trouble. Even if it's only a quick stop to say, are you all right? That's what happens. Right, well, I think that just about wraps up what I've got to say. Steve, is there anything you want to add? From an admin point of view?
Yeah. I just like to say, a lot of you probably wondering how many entries we've actually had. We've had 29 people who have actually paid the first 2 instalments, and we've had 4 people withdraw within the last 3 weeks. So we're back down to 25 people who have paid the first 2 instalments. We've also entered into other ways of paying for some people. I know it says in the regs you pay at certain dates with 4 instalments, but we're also open to any suggestions of direct debits and payments of certain amounts at whatever frequency you'd like, as long as the complete payment is made by the last date that is acceptable to us. So if that is off-putting to anybody, we're open to suggestions from people. That's basically all I've got to say. I've been doing most of the admin myself, and I've been checking everything with Ron and Mike because they've done it all before. This is the first time I've done this type of thing. My previous experience has been the Road Rallies and the Wales Rally GP with an organisational experience. But this is a totally new thing. I'm excited about it. It's a lot of work. And some people I've spoken to just can't believe that we're doing it, and they don't believe that we've been to see the Antonov people, we've seen shipping people, we've got boys in Australia working on the stages. There's so much happening, it's quite unbelievable and surprising. And although you just see us here today, we're just the tip of the iceberg. There's so much going on, and it's just too much to explain. So I'm just hoping that, after today, some of you will decide to join us and support us, because I'm, absolutely certain it's going to happen. And, just thank you for coming again today, and hopefully we can all work together in the future. Thanks.
Thank you, Steve. I think Steve mentioned the boys working in Australia. I've given the boys a bit of leeway in Australia to get things underway early, simply because it's such a big country. Everywhere else in Europe, the system that we use is to use local rally organisers as our local people. And I think pretty much the whole of Europe, everybody who's helping us is either running a WRC or an ERC rally, so we've got good guys there. We had a very pleasant few days, very short trip down to Australia to do a forum down there. And whilst we were there, we looked at the hotel situation, we looked at a start venue, we picked a couple of places. Keith Morling, who those of you who've done the event before will know is one of our Australian red shirts. Keith and Greg have pretty much got in place a start venue which for me will be the most iconic start venue we've ever had. Rather than having to do it in a hotel car park, which we've always had to do here in the UK for practical reasons, with a little bit of luck, we're starting outside the famous Doyle's Fish Restaurant on the quayside in Sydney, with the backdrop of both the Sydney Harbour Bridge and the Opera House. It's going to make for some incredible photography and filming. Mr. Winstanley, please. We've also decided to look outside the box a little bit, and instead of having a traditional welcome dinner in Sydney in the hotel restaurant, the plan at the moment is that your welcome dinner in Sydney will be on a boat. A big one, not a rowing boat, a big one. There are some fantastic river cruises that go about the harbour in the evening, and we've got Glynis and Darryl looking at options for us down there at the moment. Obviously, the other areas where we'll probably be doing a little bit of a celebration is Perth, which will be the end of the Australian leg, and we will need to do something there simply because we're going to have to do a presentation for whoever wins the Australian leg. So we'll probably do something in Perth as well. We've got, at the moment, an overnight in Adelaide. Those of you who know Oz will know that Adelaide is famous for 3 things: The first one was the Grand Prix, and tied with that the Clipsal 500 for the V8s. The second thing was the Classic Adelaide, which still runs but under the name Targa Adelaide now, which I have to tell you is one of the most fantastic events in the world. And the third thing is something completely different. It's one of those very few state capitals in the world which hasn't gone high-rise. You can stand in the middle of Adelaide and walk a 10-minute brisk walk in any direction and you're in Parkland. And you can't do that in many places now. It's a super place. They are very welcoming there. They're looking forward to us going there, looking forward to welcoming the event. Perth you've obviously all read about. There's a possibility that we might recreate something we did on the 95 event, and we might have one night or even perhaps two in order to get us the mileage we want in tent cities. These will be proper tents. They won't be little things that you fall down on you when your colleague red shirts let the ropes go, but they will be a suitable place for gentlemen and ladies of your standing, I can assure you of that. Europe, Antalya, the headquarters at the start of Rally Turkey, so they're very, very rally-wise in that area. Iskender Aroba, who looks after Turkey for us, is a man who has his fingers in so many pies and has so many contacts. I'm quite sure the route he's going to come up with is going to be amazing. Where we've gone into the former Yugoslavia countries, all of them now host rounds of the European Championship, and we've got some fantastic, really, really seriously challenging stages on the go there. We've got a night off in Rijeka in Croatia, which is one of the most picturesque resorts on that particular coast, so a time not only for fettling your cars but for having a little bit of fun and seeing what the nightlife's about, which I'm sure Mr. Starkey will no doubt partake in very well indeed, and he'll still be as fast the following morning. Moving on from there, we've got a selection of various European Championship WRC stages, then coming back up through Europe and ending up back in the UK. And again, we will finish up certainly in an extremely superior property to finish the event off in the correct manner with a superb, superb presentation dinner.